Hello economists, I'm going to talk you through the next section of our course, and we're actually moving on to a new unit which is called Business Economics. So the first section of Business Economics is sectors of the economy and factors of production. Okay, so first question, what goes into making a product? So we know businesses make products, we know that we buy products as consumers and we use them, but what actually goes into making them? Well, these are called our factors of production, and they can be split into four main categories. So these main categories are land, labour, capital, and its enterprise. So what are these categories? So the first category is land. So this could be the plot of land that a business is located on and operating from, but it's also any raw or natural resources that they use that are extracted from the land as well. Labour. This is the workforce in an economy, so the people that are working in different businesses. We have capital, which are any man-made resources that a business might use. So this might be the stock of their products, or it might be sort of more fixed capital, which is things businesses keep for a long time, such as buildings and machinery. The last one is factor of production is enterprise, and this is our entrepreneur who comes up with business ideas, takes some risks to set up a business, and then they combine the land, labour and capital and make all of that work to produce a product. So the four factors of production are land, labour, capital and enterprise. So the next thing to look at is sectors of the economy. So any economy has different types of business. So we have three main sectors that we're going to use to categorise those types of business. So businesses in the primary industry are businesses in the secondary industry and businesses in the tertiary industry. So to work out what percentage is in which, you might look two ways. One, you might look at what percentage of the workforce works in primary, secondary and tertiary, or you might look at the GDP of the economy and what percentage of the GDP is produced in primary, what's produced in secondary and what's produced in tertiary. And it's quite interesting to look at the way different economies are structured and how wealth within an economy can make this structure look different. Okay, so just to define the different sectors. So the primary sector involves the extraction of natural resources. So farming, fishing and extraction of oil are examples of industries that would be labelled as the primary sector. The secondary involves taking natural resources and converting them into manufactured or processed goods. So construction, which is building, computer assembly would happen in a factory, and cooking might happen in the kitchen of a restaurant. The tertiary sector is providing services to consumers and other businesses. So banking, transportation, they're in the tertiary sector because they're services. Also education, medicine, insurance, those services are intangible and therefore in the tertiary sector. So we know what our different sectors are, and the next question is, are all economies the same? So we've got all our different countries, some we say are big, some are small, some are more developed, some are less developed. But are they all the same? Do they all have their industry split into primary, secondary and tertiary in the same way? Well, usually not, and usually there is a pattern within those splits. So what we have is something called deindustrialization. So this is China as an example. So China has in 1978 they had 27.7% in primary, and in 2017 they had 7.9%. In 1978 they had 47.7% of their GDP in secondary, and that went down to 40.5% in 2017. And in 1978 they had 24.6% of their GDP in the tertiary sector, and in 2017 that had more than doubled to 51.6%. So what we often see is as economies grow, as economies develop, we see this shift out of primary into secondary and into tertiary. So what we're seeing here is less businesses preferring to do mining and farming, etc., and much more businesses preferring to set up in the tertiary sector. So we see a growth in the tertiary sector over time. Now this is deindustrialization, because what usually happens is secondary sector industries, which is the sort of industry part of the economy, moving into the tertiary sector, or more businesses preferring the tertiary sector to the secondary and primary. Okay, so we see deindustrialization over time. What we also see is different economies having different structures. So here, we can have a look at three quite different types of economy and their structures. So on the left, we've got the US, and we can see that they have 75% in the tertiary sector and 2% in the primary sector, whereas we can see Nepal at the other end, which is a much more low-income country, and they have 81% of their GDP in the primary sector, so in farming, etc., and very little in the secondary sector, which would mean that in Nepal there's not going to be so many factories and things. In the middle we've got Brazil, so we can see that they have got 24% in their secondary sector and 23% in their primary sector. So what we often see is more developed economies with a much bigger tertiary sector, and there are a few reasons for this. So why would businesses, or why would we see countries preferring to have the industry in the tertiary sector? Well, four main reasons. One is people may prefer to spend more of their income on services rather than manufactured goods. So people with higher incomes are more likely to use, banking, insurance, advanced medical care. There's higher spends on education, which is all in the tertiary sector. Whereas in less low-income countries, you're probably seeing people more focused on, having enough production of food. So you've got a lot of big economies. So another reason, you've got a lot of growing economies such as Brazil, China and India, which are competing in the secondary sector because they have lots of factories, lots of people working in factories. So other economies are competing in the tertiary sector instead. As countries develop, they have a bigger public sector, which provides services. So we have, a bigger growth of this in the tertiary sector. And the last one is, advances in technology are causing a reduction in the amount of people that we need to work in the secondary sector, which means, there's more opportunities in the tertiary sector. Okay, so to summarise, the four factors of production are land, labour, capital and enterprise. The three sectors of the economy are primary, secondary and tertiary. Deindustrialisation occurs because of people preferring to spend on services. Competition from countries such as Brazil, China and India, that's in the secondary sector. As countries develop, the public sector grows, which leads to the growth of the tertiary sector. And advances in technology, meaning employment in manufacturing falls, which means there's more opportunities for employment in the tertiary sector. Okay, thank you.